Hey there, and welcome back to the third episode of Crane Sessions, which is a casual teaching series about our tools at Omni AI called Grain and maybe Orc, which is our agent orchestration framework. But Grain is all about CQRS and event sourcing and essentially being the compiler layer or the shallow substrate that allows us to produce a lot of source code with AI, but keep it reasonable and prevent architectural drift. Um, and we've been building a to-do list application in the GTD style, getting things done. And that's over here on the left. And the code is available. It will be linked in the YouTube description. Um, So today, I'm planning on using a tool called UI.sh, which is from the Tailwind people, to do some sort of aesthetic improvements to the way things look in the app, and try to and kind of consolidate all of the UI patterns that are in the build so far into like a component gallery, such that repeating UI patterns and components can be sort of inspected and analyzed um, outside of the app context, which kind of like Storybook or something like that. And then there's also a couple of discussion topics that are in my mind that I might want to talk about. And that's probably what we'll do first. So I had a friend ask, what's this keyword in the def command, and also it exists in def processor, def query, um, anything except for def schemas basically, and it's essentially a namespace. It's like I think of it as like an application domain namespace, not necessarily like a code namespace. And so one thing that this namespace does is it decouples your grain primitives, so commands, queries, to-do processors, periodic tasks, read models. It decouples them from the actual like file system structure of your code base, which makes things easy to move around. Because how many times have you run into a case where refactoring is annoying or difficult because everything is kind of like uh, baked into your project file system structure. That's not the only reason that this exists. The second or another reason is um, all of these primitives end up in global registries, and if you didn't have a namespace component, they would clash, and that wouldn't be good. So you wouldn't be able to figure out why things aren't working right. And so then this kind of naturally leads to a place of, well, what should my namespace be? And currently in this project, the namespace is to do, which is possibly a terrible namespace for a to-do list application in a system where there's also things called to-do processors, which is Grain's reactive processor, or just in a coding system at all where you might have to people like go and leave to-dos for themselves. But the point is, this is an application service namespace for the to-do list application. A friend was asking me about this, and he was basically thinking of this as maybe an entity. And we had a little conversation about it. And so his argument, or what he was saying, was kind of like, I think of a command being about an entity. So maybe I would have, def command task capture task, right? In which case, if your namespace is your entity and your command is about your entity, then you could just say capture, and maybe you would have an event that was like task captured. And in the global command registry, you're going to get a registered item in the map that is like this. So this becomes the command name, task/capture. And commands are just maps, and one of the keys in them is command/name, and that's what this is, and that's how Green System looks it up in the registry. Okay, nothing wrong with any of that, as far as I'm concerned, except I no longer think about entities as being fundamental to my system when I make one. So when you do something like this, you're creating a whole sort of application domain area for an entity. And entity level thinking is what leads a lot of systems to being difficult to change, because entities aren't necessarily fundamental in an information system. They're things that kind of sprout up and grow and change and sometimes come and go over time, depending on the domain and the things that can happen in the system. And whenever I tell people that I don't think about entities anymore, they're always like, oh, let me get the sun out of my face. Can't have the sun blinding me. Okay. So when I tell people about entities and the fact that I don't consider them fundamental, everyone is so used to what's the first thing you do when you go design an application. You figure out where your entities are and how they relate. And that kind of structuring is what leads to rigidity. And they say, so you don't have entities in your system? And I have to say, of course I have entities in my system. Everyone does. It's just that they're not fundamental. And so what do you get whenever you make the transition from thinking like this to thinking like, to thinking like this? Now remember, to do is the name of our service context. I'm not a DDD, like a domain-driven design person, but if I was, I might call this like a bounded context or something like that, like to do. It's like an application service area. Where's my arrow with the? So what happens when we go from this to this? So this is an application service area. The reason we don't have more than one of those right now in our to-do list application is because I'm doing a minimal build, a minimal template. This is not the structure that is optimized for growth. Maybe I'll do another series on the sort of more productionized Grain application structure. But essentially, a Grain service component looks like an event model. It looks like this. It's an information system that's responsible for state changes. You have commands and events, and you have read models and projections and screens and things like that. And so if we had like, if this was if we charged users for this service, maybe we would have a payment service or financials. Maybe we have a financial service and we bill the customer from time to time. So we have a whole domain about doing all of the task tracking, issue management, and what the service is designed to do. But we also have this billing component, this financial system that has its own kind of like financial entities, like bills and payments and things like that, invoices, receipts. Those are not as well, they're not the same, right? Like these are two different domain areas in the application, and they contain families of entities that may come and go. Like in the to-do service, we're going to have entities like we've got tasks and projects and weekly reviews. Maybe we also have like comments, things like that. These are all entities that live within the to-do sort of application domain. And if we had a financial service or something, we would have like invoices and transactions and payments and payments, etc. Now, if every single def command was about an entity, then the fundamental unit starting place of our application and design would all be entity driven, and you would have to change those things pretty regularly, and you would be making a very granular like set of these like application sort of domain areas. But if you start with this model where you have the family and then you can talk about the entity, it's much more friendly to this it's much more friendly to change, and it's much more in line with it's much more in line with what you get when you do CQRS and event sourcing properly. Something I've been thinking about is like, what are we really doing when we do the CQRS and event sourcing style? Especially in the context of just like, I'm using this a lot with AI to produce code. What are we really turning natural language into? And remember that a command is request to change state, and then an event is a state change, and a read model or projection is a perspective about state. Okay? So events are also things that happen. Things that happen in the universe of the application domain. Most important part right here. It's everything that can happen. And everything that can happen, see, like if we look here, we want to capture a task. We're requesting the system that we capture a task. Well, if everything goes well, then the task is captured. And what we end up with, if we go and check our schemas, is what looks to me like a programming language or a DSL for an application domain sort of universe. All of our commands, where are our commands at? So here's our commands. Capture task, rename task, move task to bucket, assign task to project, remove task from project, set task due at, clear task due at, defer task, clear task, defer date, all of these things that we can do in this universe. And sure, we're talking about things like task, we're talking about things like projects, but we may decide that the language needs to evolve over time. And if the language needs to evolve over time, then we probably want to start at a more fundamental level about the sort of domain areas that things can happen in, and then the entities sprout up from there. Sure, there's going to be things like entity IDs like task ID and project ID and stuff like that in the body and metadata of these commands and events, but that's still pushing them up a level. The fundamental level is things that can happen, and it's like a DSL programming language for our application domain. And then up a level is the entities that exist in that universe of things that can happen. And that starts with metadata about them on the events. And then up the next level is the actual like projection of those entities at that point in time when they're relevant, which starts to look more like the entities that people usually start with when they design a system. So a task object or map, a project object or map. A read model is going to contain things that look a lot like regular objects or maps that we're used to, and or maybe database thinkers would be like, oh, that looks like my task table with all the columns that I would expect. But the difference is, in this kind of system, if you do it this way, it's not fundamental. It can actually be changed easier. Because what we have in this kind of system is kind of like an onion of sorts. If I can do this without making a mess of it. So we have things that happen. We have events, things that happen. And then we have an outer layer. I wonder if I can make this can I make this perfectly round? Yep, there we go. So we'll grab another one. So things that happen. Then we have our read model, which is our perspective on things that happen. It's a little long-winded, but I think it's important to talk about it this way because you can. How many times in the world do we have, or is everyone looking at the same set of facts and has a different perspective about it? So read models are just about perspective over things that can happen. So your read model is about things, your perspective over things that happen. That's where a lot of business logic lives, and that's where a lot of stuff changes. It's not, I mean, it is regular that the things that can happen can change, but more often than not, we're changing our perspective on things that can happen. And so at this level, it would be like user experience, screens that compose read models. Okay. So events are just things that can happen. Read models is where you really start to project your entities out. So you have like these domain specific read models. Like if we go find our read models here, we have in the to-do application service area, we have a projects read model. And projects are going to contain, let's see if we have a schema for our projects read model. We might not. So we might not have schemas for the read models, but we can add them. Okay, well we don't right now, but it would look like a project has tasks. It's going to look something like, I create a new project. It's going to look something like, how do I get to this thing? Open. It's going to look something like this with tasks that can be captured, buckets that they go in. It's going to need to be whatever the screen needs to compose this view of projects. So things that can happen, then we have a perspective about them, and then we can compose those perspectives often across domain. So like in an admin dashboard, you might have a perspective of all the users of your system and their projects and their latest billing info and things like that. So we can actually take perspectives about the system that are nice and neatly organized in their respective domain areas and then compose them together to make screens and experiences. And then from this level, you also have like your commands. So in that sense, you've got the ability to, create change in the system. So let's see. I can do with this arrow. So you got commands that are going to cause new things to happen. And so I guess my point is I don't recommend building around entities at the bottom level. And I think that entities are actually just things that get bucketed up. Like entities that have strong logical dependencies and domain dependencies on each other probably belong in the same sort of application service family. That way it's easy to keep them all consistent. And then sometimes you'll need to cross domain areas, which we're not doing in this project, at least not right now. But if you have to cross them, like say finance actually does billing based on how many projects someone has in their to-do list application. So you need to know that. Well, this thing has read models and perspectives for that are already canonically correct. And so finance service can make use of those. And it's a nice way to separate things. So you end up having like something like these boxes of functionality. So if we had users in the system, so the one that I'm actually okay with doing this on an entity basis is user, because like almost every system is going to have that. So you might have user. In this case, we have to do, right? And then we might have finance. And so now we can have users and put all of our auth and everything that has to keep users straight together here. And users can certainly interact with the to-do part of the system to create projects and tasks, and that's how the system gets utilized. The finance needs to know how many projects the user has to build them, and then yeah, so you can see how different areas of the system start to connect up like this, but they can be very loosely coupled and call canonical commands of another service, or they can use the canonical read models of another service. Of course, the escape hash is always there if the other service just doesn't present a canonical perspective over the same set of facts that the finance service needs. It can do its own if it needs to. It can use the event store to read those events. And so in here, of course, we'll have our like tasks, projects, comments, etc. We have our finance domain, payment methods, invoices, transactions, payments, etc. And then here we have our like users, login attempts, authentication stuff, all of that kind of stuff. So you can see that there's families of data that go well together, and then there's clearly families of data that aren't as related but exist in the same information system and need to have some interaction with each other. And so when we put things in these buckets and we don't start with the things themselves, then we can move those things around as needed. We can change them, we can version them, we can do all sorts of stuff. And so that's why in this application, this is the unit that we start with when we're namespacing everything. So hopefully that makes sense. It's definitely been working out for me in my work. All right. Perhaps we should get into it at this point. There are a couple things that I want to point out. So we need to update to the latest version of Grain. And we need to add a new package because over the week I've been reading, let's see, I've been reading this paper on, it's called Code as Agent Harness. And if I remember, I'll link it in the YouTube description. But there's an interesting decomposition of these sort of agents that we've been working with, like Claude Code or Codex. And let me see if I can find the actual paragraph here. It was like in the beginning. Let's see. There's a paragraph about splitting things into 3 layers. Three roles that code assumes in agentic systems. I don't know if this is it. It was definitely in the beginning. It's in here somewhere. Here we go. To clarify the role of code in this broader harness view, we distinguish 3 coupled elements of long-running agentic systems: model internal capabilities, system-provided harness infrastructure, and agent-initiated code artifacts. Model internal capabilities refer to the model's reasoning, perception, planning, simulation, and evaluation abilities. System-provided harness infrastructure refers to the predefined tools, APIs, sandboxes, memory systems, validators, permission boundaries, telemetry, and workflows that connect model outputs to external actions and feedback, and forms the main focus of harness engineering. In contrast, agent-initiated code artifacts, which remain relatively underexplored, are interactive code objects that agents create, execute, observe, revise, persist, and share within the task execution loop. And so 2 things stuck out to me there. What I interpret this model internal capabilities as is essentially, let me steal this onion here. So here we have a model like GPT 5.5. This thing can't do anything other than execute an inference call, or I'm assuming that the paper means this is literally just the model. It can do inference. It has the inference API. It doesn't have all the other fancy stuff that puts it into like a recursive looping kind of pattern that we see that makes us feel like the thing is, talking to us over multiple turns and stuff like that. Takes in context, a context window, does its processing, spits out tokens. Then around that, you have something like Codex. Codex is the system supplied, hold on, let me use the language they use, system provided harness infrastructure. Okay, that's like Codex. And then we have, what was it? Code agent initiated code artifacts. So we have agent, get rid of this. We have agent initiated code artifacts, artifacts. Okay. which would be like, I guess that's where I'm going. This is, they call this underexplored. Okay. So, what does this have to do with grain? I think that there are elements of this whole system supplied code infrastructure that can actually be decoupled from the particular agent harness that you're using, like Claude Code or Codex, to where if you supply this decoupled solution with one of those capable harnesses, you can get all the benefits without coding everything into one harness. Separately, agent initiated code artifacts. I think that Grain is a decoupled system provided infrastructure, and I think that a Grain application that's actually produced, all the source code that's produced by an coding agent using Grain as its infrastructure, as its substrate, as its kind of compiler for an information system architecture that's uniform, is the agent initiated code artifact. Like, if an event source system is like a programming language, a DSL for a particular domain, then that's what the agent is working on essentially. And that's what it's producing. It's one kind of agent initiated code artifact. And separately, we can have Codex here, and we can also have Grain as substrate. It's decoupled, so you're getting all the capabilities of GPT 5.5, Codex, Grain as a substrate, and then we have a Grain application, Grain app, here. So, and after reading some of that, I said, oh, well, if Grain is in this system infrastructure kind of area, then it needs to supply some code agent tools, because we produce a lot of source code in Grain, and all of the pieces are there to supply the information, immediacy, in an immediate way to a coding agent like Codex. If it just had the ability to have a consolidated and concise API for doing that. So for like getting the catalog of commands, queries, read models, processors, periodic tasks, schemas, and things like that. It can do a lot to, it can validate data. It can find all of the commands and queries in a system without actually having to do source code traversals and things like that. And so it's kind of like an MCP, but I'm skipping the MCP layer here because I'm almost always working with Codex or Claude Code in an in-REPL kind of capacity. And so it's an in-REPL API for an agent harness to have immediate access to a Grain application's kind of internal data. So we're going to add that right now. We are going to add that. So I'm going to copy this, put it in my deps file. And then I'm going to just get the latest screenshot. I don't trust myself to have this updated. So we'll just go grab this guy. Okay. Put that in there. And then I'll restart my REPL here to pull that in. Oh wait, I need to actually update all of these SHAs to the latest. Green. so now those are the same. We'll leave orc how it is for now. We're not even using orc yet in this project. I might as well get the latest orc as well. Let's see. What do we got? Grab that. Okay, then we'll start the nREPL back up, and then we will add, we'll configure the code agent tools. Back to the running REPL. Now in our like startup code here, which I think is somewhere down here. Where's this at? Here. So I'm just going to add this little bit of code. Or, okay, yeah, it's suggesting that we reorganize this a little bit, so I'll do that. And we'll keep our mulog context statement in. There. Or rather, we'll just put it here. No, sorry, in here. And then we're returning app. What is this saying? Redefined, yeah. And then we will the require up top. Okay, and that should actually start the code agent tools up when the system starts. Okay, so we got that added, and we'll make use of that in a bit. All right, so what I wanted to do today, though, so let's get Codex up and running. Get it where we can see it. Okay, so what I want to do right now, let's resume our session from the other day. Five days ago, perhaps. That's the one we want. We can start a new session. All right. So we'll go into plan mode and we'll say, okay, now we need to create a dev UI component gallery containing all of our canonical UI components that make up the application visuals. This will be where we consolidate our design system. And then I might cheat if it can't figure out what I want, then then I have some examples in some other projects. But I wanna enhance the aesthetics on this, but I don't want to do it just in the app context. I want to take the moment to actually get a UI component system in place. Current UI is pure hiccup, and all app pages already composed from reusable primitives like shell, page section, forms, task cards, project rows, badges, alerts, review controls. The gallery should probably reuse those same functions with fixture data, then expose it through a DataStar query route so it is served like the rest of the app. And we'll say, I would like dev gallery. Should gallery examples fire real DataStar commands or be inert visual specimens? And I think they should be inert. And I also think, so I think as part of this plan, we want a third file. So we'll say, as part of this plan, we want to create a new file that contains the UI components and gallery. The current UI file will pull those in to do its work. So we'll separate the reusable components from the actual screen compositions. So we'll go ahead and implement this plan. And I'm thinking about what I want this to look like. I don't quite know yet, but I know that I want it to maybe feel pretty contemporary and maybe like go in the direction of like linear, but also I wouldn't mind if it had some kind of retro flair to it, so I'm not really sure what to do with that yet. But we'll also be making use of UI.sh, which is a paid MCP setup. It's from the people that made Tailwind and this book called Refactoring UI, which people like. And so it, allegedly the MCP skill lets you sort of have your code harness take advantage of all of the UI knowledge contained within. Might as well commit that depth change while we're here. So we'll say update grain, add grain code agent tools package, update. Okay, so it looks like it's wiring things up. It's writing some view tests. I have noticed that Codex writes a lot more like view tests. I mean, since all of this is server-side rendered, you can actually write tests against the rendered like hiccup or the hiccup that will be rendered to HTML. But yeah, I've noticed it does that more than Claude Code. All right. Let's ask it to, well, once it's done, I'll ask it to eval the files, which I could actually just eval the files. I'll wait till it finishes though. Codex is also, I've noticed, a lot snappier than Claude Code, but anytime that anytime you don't see anything for more than like a couple seconds, it's probably compacting, because it seems to do compaction a lot more frequently than Claude Code does. But I guess I was wrong about that one in particular. It was busy sizing up what it wanted to delete out of the components file. It's running some tests, building CSS. Doing some wiring, I guess. Okay, app is already running. Just connect to nREPL and eval the files to reload. Although I don't know if that query will take effect. Might have to restart the app. That's something I still need to update in Grain, which is some apps are predisposed for some reason to capturing a snapshot of the Grain registries. And the idea is you should be able to register new Grain commands and queries and stuff on the fly, but there might be some inconsistency in there somewhere preventing that from being like a default path that the tools take. So. Okay, so let's see if we can actually get there. Or let's see if this is even running still. It's still running. Sometimes Codex isn't a network sandbox. Oh, well, I don't see Dev Gallery. Here, let me just... Stop the app, start the app. There's our gallery. All right, so now we can see Dev UI gallery, canonical application surfaces rendered with inert fixture data. Substrate, shared, let me zoom in on this. Shared shell surfaces, alerts, section headers, badges, and empty states. So we got badges and things like that. Nested section specimen, forms, examples, these kinds of things. Yeah, so this is like a good starting point for, yeah, and then here's compositions. So this is a good starting point for iterating on the look and feel of things. So I'm just gonna say, let's well, we should probably make sure that the app still works. test task, and we could set a due date or something. Cancel it. Reactivate it. Done. Archive. Okay, so it's basically working. Then we'll go back to the dev gallery. And we'll just commit our work. Okay, so now we're going to plan a new aesthetic and feel by iterating at the level of the gallery. I want this app to have a contemporary and polished feel, like Linear, perhaps. They have really good designs. But also want to put a potentially retro flair, maybe like Windows Vista or Windows 7. I have no idea what this is going to turn up. And we may end up throwing stuff away, but you know, it might push us in a direction. Okay, how strong should the Windows 7 or Windows Vista 7 influence be in the aesthetic exploration? So accent layer keeps the app linear-like and polished with Vista/7 cues and glass, highlights, depth, color accents. A balanced hybrid makes retro system UI a co-equal part of the product language through chrome, gradients, and glossy controls. Full nostalgia leans intentionally into Windows 7 era panels, gloss, and desktop UI references with more visual personality. Maybe we could start with full nostalgia and then pull it back. How should we iterate on the gallery? Add multiple gallery level aesthetic variants with a picker so we can compare in browser before finalizing. Implement one opinionated aesthetic pass directly across the gallery. theme tokens first. Start only with palette. You don't want to make the gallery too complicated, but maybe that's a good idea to have things to choose from. Then there's definitely, I mean, I don't like the, we're definitely going to work on the workflow as well. I don't think this is currently a good workflow the way that it has these things. Okay, so add a gallery level design picker around the rendered gallery with these options. The current, Aero Glass console, Windows 7 productivity, Vista sidebar workbench, polished Aero minimal. Yeah. Yeah, so let's just do it. And it could come out looking like garbage, so this is an experiment. Looks like it's doing some unnecessary JavaScripting. Yeah, I don't want extra JavaScript just to do picking. Come on now. This variant picker idea may end up being more trouble than it's worth. See if anything has changed. It'd be interesting to see what it actually comes up with. option stuff there, although it's all like text. So. Maybe this time it's compacting, although we could just be writing a bunch of code. Oh, there we go. Yeah, I don't know about this workflow. Oh my god. Yeah, that's funny. And that just doesn't look good at all. And this just looks like normal. What's the difference? I guess there is a difference. I'm gonna have it take a look. Can you take a look visually with Playwright? Sure, it's looking as you expect. So we'll have it drive the browser a little bit. Okay, we can also get a big screen here. So if we're trying to go for like a glass look, we're not getting that yet. And also, I hate the color scheme. It's still using the same colors everywhere. Yeah, the Vista one still looks pretty bad. It's so dark. Why is it so dark? Did I change anything? We need to change the saturation of these button and badge colors. Oh, there we go. That's kind of interesting. Art styling is really like overdone right now. So I think we need to consider minimalism here. So far, I like this Vista direction the most. We want to craft a minimalist aesthetic. Also, colors on buttons, badges, etc. should be constrained, warm, not so saturated. maybe after we get it into a place we like, we can add some style guide principles at the top. So I think let's lock into the Vista direction and continue with the next pass on that. Yeah, it seems like maybe we're missing like a task page or something. Or maybe a modal shell. We'll do page for now. All right, lock the design direction to the light Vista arrow aesthetic, then simplify card and controls so the app feels polished, formed, and restrained instead of dense. Yeah. Yeah. Let's do that. I feel like we could get glassier and glossier here, so maybe we'll approach that too at some point. It's creating a new screen query for the task. The future of programming. Let's go eval some files. Maybe restart the app. These, and the main thing here. Stop, start, boom, boom. Ugh. That looks terrible. Oops. What is this maniac doing? Okay. Still not looking good. It doesn't quite follow that design, does it? How about we do some actual research? All right. Probably should have started here. But we live and learn. The saturation on these colors made it look completely dead. Do, 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 do. A lot of waiting around in this day and age. Okay, this seems like it's compacting. Although the last 3 times I've tried to guess that, I've been wrong. Wow, how did it make the label, the badge is so chunky. Yikes. Okay, guess I was working on that. Okay, this is starting to look more cohesive. But each one of these surfaces is still doing too much work. It's a little better. That's looking better. Still need to work on the individual cards and components, but the visuals coming together. And maybe do some typography work as well. The error message is bad. Okay, so now we've got more than one of those. Oh yeah, looks better without the dashed outline. Definitely got some workflow composition issues to take care of here. Yeah, it's just trying to keep track of what's doing on mobile and widescreen. Redesign task detail page. So the accordion editor is removed entirely. The page becomes a two-column composition. Primary task are on the left. Right sidebar for task controls, metadata editing, secondary actions. Yep. And I think at some point we'll make this all updatable on Blur, so it's not, so you don't need a button for everything. I think we'll finish up this edit and then call it for this stream. Cheat with declare when it should really just put things in the right order. At some point, I'll just have to start using this app in order to change the experience in the right way. Okay, so that's the new sidebar. Truly disgusting looking to some extent. Okay, it's looking better. I don't know why rename is still down there though. Okay, it's looking better, but instead of having all these buttons, let's figure out to actually let's commit. We'll commit, then we'll do that. Oh, did I do that in plan mode? That's hilarious. Yeah, one thing that's gonna make this more fluid is, being able to click in the title and edit it. Not needing buttons for everything. All right, I'm gonna call it here for today, though. If you're still watching, that's interesting because I haven't really been talking. I've just been kind of like working with the harness and getting things in place here and changing up the aesthetic. But I will catch you next time. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.